gang? Welcome to the Friday episode of the Dollar Bandits. I'm Orrin Phillips, and today we're talking to a man who has written books. He's written comic books. He's a fan of all things cool, toys, Star Wars, you name it. Talk about Jim Beard. Jim is a wonderful writer. I'm actually reading a book of his right now about the Marvel team ups. He does a phenomenal job on those books. Go to Amazon, just type in Jim Beard. There's a whole list of books here. We're going to talk about those. We're going to talk about his creative process, why he loves comics, and his experience writing comics. So, without further ado, here's Jim. Dear Jim, thank you so much for taking the time.
Hey, thank you very much. I can't swear I've ever been in the dollar bin before, but I know I've been in the $1.99 bin before.
It's nice to have that kind of money to bump it up that extra 99 cents.
Yeah.
You can get the
My
book without the
my
stain.
original Spider-Man novel wound up at Ollie's at $1.99. So I
Don't
can
take it
claim
personally.
that.
Jack Kirby's there too, and so are a
Yeah,
lot
that's
of
true.
folks. So you're in good company with that.
I am indeed. Yeah, I can't get much better than that.
So let's start at the very beginning. How do you first discover comics?
My dad. I credit my dad with just about every pop culture thing that I love. I'm lucky to have a dad who, grew up with all of that stuff and was a pop culture guy himself. Still is. He's still with us. And literally, he started buying me comics from a very early age. He saw that I was looking at some of the ones that were laying around the house that some of my older siblings had, even some of the ones that he still had a couple ones from the 50s laying around. And I think he saw that I was different from my siblings. They got the sports gene from him, but I got the pop culture gene from him. But he used to do things like, here, sit down. He'd see The Prisoner was on TV, and he'd go, watch this. This is really cool. This is really fun. He'd encourage all kinds of stuff like that. And boy, I look back and how blessed that I am that he really, really encouraged the love of all of that stuff.
Most definitely. So, at what point in your life do you say, you know what, I kind of want to get in the industry myself? What made that decision?
That's from really early on. And like a lot of kids, I made my own comics.
Mhm.
I mean, that's sort of a rite of passage right there. Am I right? Yeah.
I think so.
And I got to the point where I actually was a visual artist before I was a writer. And that just never worked out. I don't know if it was I didn't have the drive or what, or I always thought that there was something better, somebody better than me.
Mhm.
I could ape other comic artists, and do all of that and draw really, great Kirby's and everything, but I had to have that reference in front of me.
Mhm.
And again, it just never worked out. I started being a letter hack. I guess I could credit that with how I got started, and was really enjoying that. That was back when like James Robinson and Jeff Johns were doing JSA and bringing back all of that stuff. Jeff was writing The Flash, all of that. I was really sending in letters. I got to know, the editor, Peter Tomasi. He knew who I was, and I was getting a lot of letters printed.
Mhm.
And that was when I said, okay, maybe I can try to send them pitches. Folks, that doesn't always work. Yeah, believe me. It was a really weird time at that point. It was like the tail end of an era where a fan could more easily get in the door. I I got there literally right at the end of that. At one point I was talking to Jeff, and uh, I said something about I love the character of Red Tornado, the android Red Tornado. Although I love the Golden Age Red Tornado too. And I started saying something about how much of a shame it was that books were starting to come out and saying that he got his start with the Justice League. And here's me, my hackles going up saying, no, no, no. He tried to infiltrate the Justice Society.
Right.
What are you talking about? And I hated that. There was some revisionism going on, some retconning. and I threw out this little idea, and Jeff goes like, can you put it in the JSA comic? And he's like, why don't you just write that yourself? And so I did. I wrote a couple of pages of script. He kind of looked at it, and he gave me a couple of pieces of advice, and then I sent it on to DC. And I remember the day I got a phone call from DC. It was on my birthday, 2002, maybe, I think it was 2001, 2002. And they said, okay, yeah, we'd like to buy your story. It's going to be in JLA JSA Secret Files #1.
Wow.
And I was, but I also made the mistake of thinking, okay, this is it. This is the beginning. I can do this thing. And I got a really, really big head about it. Um, I right at that same time, Jeff was writing Hawkman's Secret Files #1, and he said, "I don't have time to do all the profile pages. They used to
Yep.
have the text pieces, with the great illustrations and everything." And he's like, "Can you do it? Do you want to write it?" Yeah. So again, I thought, oh my God, if I can get like, a gig like this every month, I'll quit my job and everything. There was some hubris going on there, because when you spit in the eye of God and think that you can ascend Mount Olympus that quick, it doesn't work. Um, I got a Star Wars story right after that, 2003, with Dark Horse,
Mhm.
and then that was it. That was literally when the castle of the industry literally shut. The portcullis came down. They drew in the drawbridge. The moat, was restocked with alligators or crocodiles or whatever, and it was almost impossible to get in. And I spent the next few years, I kept sending things in, and then I just got really, really frustrated with it. And then that was when I said, I have such an urge to write that I tried to get over to prose, and that's where I still am, today. Done a couple more things, did a couple of Ghostbusters comic books
Mhm.
for IDW, and of course they lost the license. It's always something or whatever. But my little dalliances with the industry, as a professional, have just been fun, and I'm really proud of them. And what the really fun thing is being at a show and have somebody come up to you
Mhm.
and they're holding a copy of JLA JSA Secret Files, and you're kind of like, okay, sure, I'll sign.
Hey, I mean, for every fan, that's got to be their dream, though. I mean,
Yeah,
especially a #1 issue,
yeah,
it's got to be
yeah, yeah.
cool to be
Hey, I
like,
like that. Well, I don't know
yeah,
why I never thought of that. Yeah, I mean, yeah, and the Hawkman one too is the #1. Okay, I
yeah.
didn't see #1. All
What
right, I like that.
what was the experience like with Ghostbusters? Because yeah, that's a licensed property. Was there a lot of
Yeah.
kind of cooks in the kitchen to see what you were doing with
No,
that, or is it pretty?
no. I have been, with the few comic book projects I have done, I have been so lucky as far as not only working with the editors, but working with the license holders. I mean, you know how that goes. You have more levels than just going through the editor at the comic book company.
Right.
You've got that licensor, and they're going to run some interference, but you're still getting glimpses.
Mm,
Usually, I don't know how it is now or with other people, but back then you didn't really have direct contact with the licensor.
mm,
You were, they were getting stuff from the editor, and then they would send notes back, and then they would filter it into you. But I just had really, really great experiences. The Star Wars experience was really good. The Ghostbusters one was just fantastic. I co-wrote both of those one shots with my writing partner Keith Dallas, and they're about 9 years apart. We did one in like 2009, I think it was,
mm.
called Convolution, where with the Hollywood pitch of what if the Ghostbusters go to a comic book convention, and hilarity ensues. And then our same editor, he's not with him anymore, Tom Waltz. He came
Mhm.
back for the 35th anniversary of Ghostbusters, which would be 2019, if I remember correctly, I think was the 35th anniversary. And he came back to both of us and he said, you guys want to do another one? And we're like, yeah, we've been waiting 9 years to do another one, of course. And we got to do Extreme Ghostbusters.
Okay.
You're saying okay, but do you know what that is? Because
No, I know.
we didn't. So they wanted to do four one shots, and they did classic Ghostbusters. They did the all female team, which I found out then was they're actually called the Answer the Call Ghostbusters or something like that. Then they wanted to do Real Ghostbusters, the cartoon, and then they wanted to do Extreme Ghostbusters, which is also a cartoon. And Keith and I are like, yeah, all right, this is great, whatever. We shut down our emails, we get on the phone with each other, and literally we're saying at the same time, what in the hell is Extreme Ghostbusters? So we found out it was a cartoon in the 90s, and it was supposedly looked at as a sequel to Real Ghostbusters.
Okay.
And I think maybe there's only like one season of it, but so we started watching episodes on YouTube and found out that it's really good.
Mhm.
It's really edgy. It's almost like they knew that the kids who watched Real Ghostbusters grew up and wanted something a little stronger.
Mhm.
Super creepy creatures, ghosts, monsters, super edgy stories.
Mhm.
We really loved it, but what we loved the most was the characters. It's Egon and a group of young kids,
Okay.
and we fell in love with the characters. We had such a blast writing that we begged Tom to, like, okay, can we pitch you like a 4 or 6 issue miniseries with Extreme Ghostbusters? Because we were getting a lot of fans who were, writing to us or coming up to us and saying, you guys did a great job. We actually advanced the relationship between two of the characters. We got permission to do that.
Okay.
But again, um, Ghostbusters is owned by Sony. No, so whoever Ghostbusters is owned by. But they were really really good. The only thing that we had to change for convolution was there was a stand-in for Jack Kirby. That we had a guy who was, and there was like sort of a stand-in for Stan Lee also. And in fact, it was the ghost of this Jack Kirby character. We had a name that was something like, Jake Kurtz or something like that, and they're
Yeah.
like a little too on the nose. So it's like a completely different name. And he has a big mustache, the Kirby guy.
Right.
But if you read it, you know damn well that and that's what Keith was saying. Like, everybody's gonna know who the heck we're talking about here, but they want us to change the name, so
All
they
right.
were afraid that the Kirby estate was gonna sue them or something.
What's it like to be part of the Star Wars universe? Because I mean, you are.
That's Star Wars is like, I mean, past my superheroes, my comic book superheroes, I think Star Wars is pretty much like the be all and end all of my pop culture life. Um, that was amazing. I mean, I know that probably sounds kind of weak, but um, I couldn't believe it when I got that pitch through. I had a friend who was an assistant editor for Dark Horse at the time,
Okay.
and we were talking, and he said, if you want to send me some pitches for what back then they called it Star Wars Tales. It
Mhm.
was an anthology series of short stories, and he said, I'll see if I can, get them to the main editor. And I started and I got shot down a couple times. I remember that. I thought, oh my God, these pitches will get through. And they were like, yeah, they're good, but like,
Mhm.
I had one that was about one of the guys that was the Emperor's advisors. He's in the background of Return of the Jedi. And they have the really tall, weird hats. They look like weird priests or
And they
something
made like
like that.
one figure of him that's hard to find.
Yeah, right. And so I wrote a story pitch about one of those guys who decided to, like, turn traitor, and at the end Vader comes to get him or whatever. And I just thought, this is just the greatest thing. And they're like, Yeah, Lucasfilm was like, yeah, we don't really want to focus on such a minor character. I pitched another one, nothing. I was really, really bummed out, and I said my friend kept saying like, well, try it again, just try it again. We'll keep trying.
Mhm.
And they finally accepted a pitch. I wrote a pitch. I said, this is it or nothing, because this is all I got in me. And they came back and they said, you did it, you got it, that's great. And I went back and I read the pitch again through, and I realized what I had done is I had sort of written about my situation and frustration with not being able to get a pitch past them. And maybe there was some kind of truth or truism in it or whatever, and somebody saw that and sensed it, and they accepted that. And it ended up in Star Wars Tales. It was drawn by Todd Nauck,
Okay.
which again, these like today, I'm just so amazed, that I can say that I work with Todd. And um, it's kind of cool because it's been reprinted almost like several times now. It just so it got printed in the like in the first trade, and then it was in like an omnibus, and then it's in $100 slipcase hardcover called Luke Skywalker: Last Best Hope for the Galaxy.
Okay.
I remember I stumbled upon that somehow. They didn't even like let me know, but they went and they collected all of these stories that were focused on Luke Skywalker, and mine is about a 15-year-old Luke Skywalker.
Mhm.
And I'm like, can I have a comp copy of that? And they did. They sent me this. So it's just this, and I mean, they probably made only like a very few of them. Beautiful, beautiful book. And then, so now, since Marvel's had the license back, and when Dark Horse got it, they were allowed to reprint Marvel stuff. Marvel got it back and is allowed to reprint Dark Horse stuff. So I got a little royalty check one time, and I'm like, the heck is this all about? I used to work for Marvel.com, and I asked my editor, and he looked into it, and he came back and he goes, "Oh, that's for your Star Wars story." I'm like, that was years ago and for a different company. And so now Marvel's reprinted it twice now, and
Nice.
I literally get a couple of bucks when they reprint it. So not so bad.
I want to talk Spider-Man in a second, but going back to licensed things, one project you worked on is one that it's almost like a small sect of people are very excited about, but it's Captain Action. And I know our buddy Ed Cato, he's trying helping bring it back. How did you get involved with Captain Action? And who owned it at the time, or was it just out
It
there on the public domain?
the same people who own it now, Joe and Ed, Joe Ahern and Ed Cato, who
Yep.
are beautiful guys, and I love them dearly, and always enjoy working with them. Um, so I had become a prose writer, and more specifically a pulp writer.
Mhm.
I found out that I couldn't write like the great American novel or slice of life stuff, but I could write pulp because I'm not only a comic book fan, but a fan of all the stuff that led to comic books. And my dad, again, infused that into me. He was a huge fan of The Shadow.
Yes.
So, I mean, I literally got that in my DNA. I'm more of a fan of Doc Savage, but I like The Shadow quite a bit. At one point, I got to know Joe and Ed, and it was really exciting because Captain Action, although you're right, I mean, out in the greater world, nobody really knows who Captain Action is. But
Right.
at one point, he was the rival to G.I. Joe,
Yep.
rival to it. And it only lasted for 3 years, roughly the same amount of time that the Batman 66 TV show lasted,
Mhm.
66 to 68 or so. But um, I got this idea that because they were talking about or doing comics through Moonstone, I think at that time. And they had a whole Bible that they had written, giving the character a whole new background because they couldn't use anything from the 5-issue DC Comics series back when the toy was actually
Mhm.
a viable thing. They couldn't use any of that. They couldn't use the name Clive Arno. They couldn't use Kralik. any of that stuff. I don't think they couldn't call Dr. Evil Dr. Tracy or any of that stuff whatsoever. But so they came up with a whole new background and why he was the way he was and how he could change his face and all of that. And I went to them and I said, wouldn't it be cool to do like a pulp magazine, except it would be Captain Action, and it would be Captain Action prose stories. They love that idea, and over a little bit of time, that kind of transformed into a full pulp novel instead of like acting like it was a magazine with a couple of stories in it.
Right.
I was working with a company called Airship 27.
Mhm.
Ron Fortier is the head of it, and he's the one that brought the Green Hornet back to Now Comics in the 90s. He's really known for that. Really great stuff. I love his Green Hornet comics. And that all kind of clicked. I brought Joe and Ed together with Ron and Rob, who did Airship 27, and we put out that Captain Action novel, and that was a joy of a project because it was it was like breathing some new life into that character, and in a way kind of explaining funny little things like why does he wear a sailor's cap?
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise he's high tech, but he's got this funky sailor cap on or whatever, and different things like that. Had a really really great time, and then we did two more, so it's kind of a trilogy altogether. And that's kind of funny because now it's yet another iteration of Captain Action
Mhm.
that they're coming out with, and I'm dying to talk with them about what could we do something again,
Yeah.
like that. I think it would be really really fun. But yeah, I'm really really proud of that. That's one of the earliest. That's probably like my first prose license that I did after a few comic things.
Give me your blueprint of Captain Action. Who is he? What motivates him in your mind? Like what, who is he to you?
Yeah, he's well, in the novels he's Miles Drake, and I have a feeling they probably are going to even move on from that, and he's probably going to have a new name.
Mhm.
Um, you know, I will admit it, he doesn't have an immensely distinct characterization because he we were doing it as a like a pure pulp type of thing, and pulp is not necessarily character driven, it's story driven, and usually the characters are kind of roughly sketched from back in the day, and there's not a whole lot of motivation. I mean, Doc Savage is pretty much he was raised to do good, so he does good. Why the Shadow does good, I'm not even really sure. But Captain Action actually was less of a superhero the way we did it, and more of a secret agent. He worked for a group called Action, which was an acronym, and I don't ask me to remember what the hell that actually meant, but so um there was that where he was operating for them. I have the discussion with people a lot about what is a superhero, and sometimes people say, well, but James Bond is a superhero, and it's like, no, he doesn't really fit the criteria as far as I'm concerned, because he does what he does because he works for somebody,
Mhm.
and that he's not, I mean, I'm not saying he's not a hero, but he's not a superhero,
Right.
in that sense, which they're pretty much, for the most part, vigilantes.
Mhm.
Um, Miles Drake is kind of more like that. He maybe, if anything, he's a little bit of a cross of a superhero and James Bond.
Right.
You know, he has a superhero type outfit, but if I remember correctly, in the books, we did it more that was more for like publicity reasons than anything. The action group, the public knew about them, and Captain Action was sort of the face of them. If he wasn't that, I think that he might not have worn that costume at all.
Gotcha.
You know,
So from there, we have a true, in the sense, superhero, Spider-Man.
yeah.
How did you get that? How did that all come together?
That's a topic that I'm not that fond of,
Ah,
but it's gotten better over the years.
yeah.
You know, it's interesting, Oren. You brought up about what was it like to work, like on Ghostbusters and things like that.
Mhm.
The comic book license holders were all really wonderful to work with. When I got to do that Spider-Man novel, Marvel was not very good to work with at all. Or at least the nameless, faceless person that I had to go through. There was a Canadian publisher called Joe Books, so now several years ago, and somehow they were little. They were literally this. They had a little skeleton crew of people. They maybe probably had 5 employees at that. They somehow got the Marvel license to do prose novels, and I think it's because they were working with Disney.
Mhm.
But I think that was before Marvel was bought by Disney.
Okay.
But I think that's probably what they did. They probably held up the Disney books that they were doing and to Marvel. Marvel said, "Oh, well, you must be good in quality and everything because you're doing that." They went to a friend of mine, Paul Kupperberg. Thank you. I see the smile there. Good.
Yes.
He deserves a smile. And they asked him to write for them because he's one of the ones that kicked off some of the original uh, Marvel hero novels in the 70s.
Mhm.
In fact, I think the very first one is his, if I'm not mistaken.
I think
Maybe,
so.
maybe not. He did Murder Moon. I know. I'm pretty sure that's the one with Spider-Man and the Hulk. But I think he did another one too.
Mhm.
He said that he didn't have the time at that point, but he suggested me, and again, I was floored and flabbergasted. So I started talking with Joe Books, and they're like, okay, pitch us some things, and it was like it's Spider-Man or nothing. I mean, as far as because they weren't doing Fantastic Four. That was not one of the ones that they were allowed to do, or that's I would have gone with Fantastic Four because the Thing, Ben Grimm, the Thing is my most favorite Marvel character. Spider-Man would come in a close second to that. It was like Captain America, Spider-Man, Thor, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Iron Man. And there were already some of the novels out from some of the other ones, but I don't think there was a Spider-Man one at that point. I made a pitch and they liked it, and I wrote the novel. It's so funny. They didn't even have a real editor on staff. They had to get a freelance editor. They had to hire a freelance editor to work with me on it. He was a super nice guy, really helpful and encouraging. But we started they're like, I got halfway through the novel and he's like, can you give us that? We're kind of like we want to get this done quicker,
Right.
sooner than later. And so I was getting notes back before I was even done with it. But it pretty much right off the bat, the stuff that this person at Marvel was coming back with was just some of the most inane stuff. It was almost as if they didn't even really know the character, which was really kind of scary.
Mhm.
Um, Two of the things that I can remember very clearly is they were very particular about the character of Mary Jane.
Mhm.
I have a feeling it was a woman who was the Marvel contact person because the things that they were saying, you could tell they were being very protective of a female character.
Mhm.
You couldn't have the slightest little thing that cast them in a poor light. And at one point, was saying in there that Mary Jane used to be a party girl, but she changed. They came back and they said, nope, cannot say that she's a party girl. And me and my editor are like, number one, she was in the comics.
Right.
And number two, she changed. And we're saying in this novel that she's not like that anymore. It's given the character the background, right? There was nothing at all that Peter could not do anything that made it look like they kissed at one point, like kissed hello, kissed goodbye, whatever it was. They
Mhm.
made me take that out because they said that means that Mary Jane's not her own person. because
What?
she might be in a relationship with Peter. It's like, and it's like being in the Twilight Zone, or one of those, universes in Multiverse of Madness, where everything's cockeyed. The one that really did it was Spider-Man's fighting Hydra, and he's fighting Hydra agents um, uh, in New York City and at night and around these sort of big gantry things.
Mhm.
And he knocked out one of the Hydra agents. And when the Hydra agent woke up, he's webbed up and kind of hanging from some girders, and Spider-Man's like hanging upside down in front of him, like staring at him, and he's like, okay, I want some answers. And the Hydra agent immediately chomps down on his tooth. He's got a poison tooth.
Mhm.
He's not going to be questioned. And Spider-Man goes, sorry, and holds up the tooth.
Yeah.
This person at Marvel came back and said, I this is verbatim, Oren. Spider-Man does not torture his enemies.
Wow.
I was like, I didn't even know what to say at that point.
Right.
So luckily, my editor was willing to do this because I like talked it out with him, and we presented that there was some things, whatever, we just went ahead with, but there were different points where we presented arguments
Mhm.
and went down, 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 and everything. And they backed off on that whole thing because I said that's silly because the guy was unconscious and Spider-Man took the tooth out when he was unconscious,
Right.
and he saved the guy from killing himself, committing suicide.
Right.
How do you get torture out of that? And they backed off on that. They backed off on a couple different things, but the marriage, oh, they did back off on the thing about she used to be a party girl.
Okay.
But they wanted us to stay away from anything that there was a whiff of her being Spider or Peter's girlfriend, because that had the connotation of the old school, the hero has a girlfriend, I guess, you know. So they're just very good friends in
Yeah.
the novel. It
That's
was it
funny.
was just some weird ass stuff. I got to tell you. So, and then the book came out, and literally Joe Books didn't do 1 ounce of promotion. It literally just came out and there was nothing. They didn't talk about it online, nothing at all. They weren't even really promoting the previous novels, and a couple more came out after that. I was crushed because again, it was another one of those moments where I said, "All right, this is the height. I've written a Spider-Man novel, and it's official. I can do anything now. I mean, I'm back to that same dumb thing, where I'm, and nothing. It did nothing. It went nowhere. I got paid. I mean, and when I was paging through it, I realized I'm like all these typos in it. It looks like they accidentally put out an uncorrected proof as the final. So it was it was not a good experience.
Experience.
Other than I did learn some lessons from it, but and for a while I literally I refuse. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to sign them or anything. And then it's so funny. About a year or so ago, people start telling me, "Hey, I saw your Spider-Man novel at Ollie's for $1.99." Long story short, Joe Books went bankrupt. It's been several years now, and sadly, the guys that wrote and had novels published after me, they
Mhm.
never got paid.
Wow.
And so and I think to this day they still haven't gotten paid. They were waiting for it to go through litigation and that whole bankruptcy thing.
Right.
The weird thing is that no one seems to exactly know where those novels are. I mean they're owned by Marvel, but
Right.
there's no, I guess they have no intention to do anything. They're just kind of in limbo
Yeah.
now. I mean, I still like the book, although I kind of think of it as gutted. They chopped out some other things. They made me change this or that. They had one character that in the comic books he was dead, and they said I couldn't use him in the novel because he's dead. And I said he's dead in the comic books.
Right.
You know, um, one of the real thrills that I had is they allowed me to use Phil Coulson,
Okay.
which is really cool. And um, the the show Agents of Shield.
Yep.
Daisy, her superhero name was
Oh.
created by Brian Michael Bendis. Isn't that terrible? Not Shock, Quake. I think it's Quake,
Good.
maybe. I had to interview Brian one time for Marvel.com, and I after we were done, I said this was when I was still excited about it. I said my Spider-Man novel's coming out, and he was cool. He was like, "Oh, that is great," everything, and I said, "Yeah," and Quake is in it, and he then really you could tell he really lit up, and he goes, "You dude, you know what?" And I said, "What?" He goes, "That's the very first prose appearance of Quake."
Oh wow.
Like she was only a comic book character, before that. So
Yeah.
that's
That's
my tiny little claim to fame.
well, one thing that you and I share in common besides comics, Universal Horror, of course, is G.I. Joe. Uh, you have a book of G.I. Joe
I
that
like you.
I think we were separated at birth somehow because
I know, right?
but yeah, we like all the same stuff. Uh, why did G.I. Joe have such an impact on you?
I think it might be because I got my GI Joe at such an early age. I was 4.5. It was Christmas of '69, and it was I was deep into the space program at that point, and what I got was the GI Joe astronaut and space capsule.
Okay.
So I think that had a lot to do with it. And I don't know if this was on purpose or if it was literally the luck of the draw. It was they got it from my parents got it from Sears, and the Sears one you actually got the GI Joe with it.
Okay.
Sometimes if you bought it elsewhere, it was like figure not included. But this, and I love this, he was a redhead and I'm a redhead.
Mhm.
So as a 4.5-year-old kid, not only do I have my own astronaut and my own Mercury space capsule, this guy's a redhead,
Right.
and I was just, and you'll please pardon the pun, over the moon,
Yeah.
because Apollo, we were heading into Apollo. I mean, literally in July of that year, landing on the moon. I mean, there couldn't be anything better. And I think that had a lot to do with it. And it makes me wonder if I had gotten one a little later on and it wasn't an astronaut, if I would feel the same. Also, things were changing. That literally the clock ticks over and you're into 1970, and he's suddenly the adventure team.
Yep.
So I had the very end of the soldier era, although it was called Adventures of G.I. Joe for that last year of the 60s or so. And but then everything else that I got after that was all adventure team stuff.
Right.
So I had a smooth-headed, painted-haired GI Joe where all my friends who were a little younger than me, they all had the fuzzy heads.
Right.
So mine was really different, from that. So, but it stands as my most favorite toy. If I look back, that was the toy that I had the most fun playing with, the one that I played with the most, the one that sparked my imagination the most. I gave my GI Joe a name of his own. I wonder how many kids actually did that,
Mhm.
and that kind of presaged what came later with Real American Hero, where suddenly all of them did have their own
Sure.
names and
Yep.
designations, and GI Joe was the name of the organization.
Mhm.
Uh, so it's a lot of that. I mean, I had a lot of joy from playing with that.
Yeah.
I collect them today. I wish I had my original, but he's long, long gone. He's probably in a landfill somewhere. But he served well over
I was
those
to
years.
say
Yeah.
he
He
deserves
didn't have any nose. By the time he went to the Goodwill, his nose was pretty much gone because I had the space helmet, the space suit helmet,
yeah.
and the deep sea diving helmet. And the more you took those on and off, on and off, on and off, it wore down. I think I had, he was probably had some masking tape on him and stuff, but he was well loved.
Now, this next thing, I had to be honest, and I've told this other people, I've never seen an episode of Doctor Who. I have a vague idea of what it's about, but I know it was popular. It's becoming more and more popular. It's on Disney Plus now.
Yeah.
For you, how have you seen the popularity of the show grow, and do you like what's going on with it now?
Um, the, that's a tough one. So I was kind of like you. I'd known what Doctor Who was for a long, long time.
Mhm.
And mostly that was from reading Starlog magazine. That was our internet,
Right.
back then. And there would be once in a while mentions of Doctor Who, articles about Doctor Who. I had a good friend in high school who was watching it on the PBS.
Mhm.
I think it was PBS that was showing it, and I don't know what it was. I wasn't driven to watch it, but he was a huge fan, and he used to tell me about it. They were showing all the Tom Baker, who's like literally the most popular classic Doctor. Flash forward to, I hate to say it, I can't remember what year, 89, 90, it was the early 90s, 93, 92, when they did a TV movie. It was a joint American British production with Doctor Who, and that was supposed to launch a series, but it didn't do well, I guess. My wife and I watched that. I was really surprised because she was not a Doctor Who fan either. And she said, you know what? She saw the listings and she said, I'd really like to watch that. And it was Paul McGann, actor Paul McGann, who played the character. We really, really liked it. And then nothing materialized after that. And then they finally did, BBC got the series going again, and it was Christopher Eccleston. And that kicked off what they now call New Who, which is the modern era, which is still going on, to this day. And we watched that whole season. Christopher is just one season. We enjoyed it, but we got to the very end, and he regenerates into David Tennant, who is pretty much, maybe possibly, is the most popular of the New Who era Doctors. My wife took one look at his face and said, "Oh my God, he's ugly. I don't like him at all." And we didn't watch it after that. We tried Peter Capaldi when he came along because he was kind of an older gentleman.
Mhm.
They kept having these real young guys, and that was kind of a flashback to some of the older guys that they had in the 60s and 70s, and we only watched like half of a season. So it was kind of funny because a little over a year ago, I finished up a big Ultraman watch. I watched everything from Ultraman 66 all the way up to Ultraman 80. It's like six or seven different series, and was just loving it. It was this kind of a project. And I got done, and I said, I need something to watch. What's another series that I could watch? And I started looking around and I said, what's like the equivalent of Ultraman? And I realized what the equivalent is Doctor Who. Doctor Who and Ultraman are both icons in their respective countries.
Mhm.
They both started in the 60s, and they kept reinventing it.
Mhm.
Once an Ultraman was finished, another one stepped in, and they'd immediately start a new series of Ultraman. When that ended, they started another one, and that went on and on and on for years. It's the same with Doctor Who. The
Right.
one regenerates and a new one comes in. So I was talking to my good friend John S. Drew, who's like Mr. Podcast. He's podcast, he does podcasts of everything. The one that I did a lot with him was the Batcave podcast. And I was telling him about that. And I said, John, I'm thinking about Doctor Who. And he's like the biggest Doctor Who fan and has been since the 80s. And he's like, well, if you do that, we could do a podcast of that. And he said, think about it. That would be really interesting. He said, you would be totally new to it.
Mhm.
And he said, and I've been watching it since the 80s. So it's, we joke, it's like he's a Whovian and I'm a Nuvian or Nubian or whatever. And that's our whole shtick. And we're having a blast. We're almost through the third Doctor, who's John Pertwee, and every episode of our podcast is a storyline. So back in the old days, it was a multi-part story. Every episode was it was a serial. Nowadays, it's literally every episode is its own story, and the setup is really different. But
Right.
we added in, we have a Patreon for it also, but we added in we decided we that I wanted to watch the new Doctor Ncuti Gatwa,
Mhm.
and because there was a promise that there was going to be a lot of callbacks to classic Doctor Who, which that's what I'm in the middle of right now. And for the most part, it has. It's interesting. I love Ncuti. I haven't cared much for that first season is really schizophrenic.
Gotcha.
It's like it's up and down. There was some that I liked and there was some that I just really disliked. And then the wrap up wasn't that the greatest thing ever. We're going to keep going, and hope that it gets better. That's that old fan thing, right?
Well, that,
But yeah, so I mean it's amazingly iconic. I watched a video of some concert hall in England just recently, and they do regular yearly concerts. And I guess it was that you don't know what the orchestra is going to play next. And there's a video of it on YouTube where they launch into the Doctor Who theme. Everybody in that auditorium or whatever goes nuts. And I said, John, that is the coolest, greatest thing. It's like everybody in England has it in them, the Doctor Who theme. It's in their DNA. It's like their national anthem. Forget God Save the Queen. It's more like God Save the Doctor. And I love the vibe from it. And I said, do you know what? I said, I can't think of anything that we have like that here in the United States, where an orchestra could start playing a theme
mhm.
and everybody would know what it is and go nuts about it. And we kept trying to throw ones out, and I said, okay, sort of Star Wars. I said, oh, it was I said, imagine a TV series. We could not think of one single TV series that everybody, regardless of age, take the most popular American TV series. So let's say MASH,
Right.
right? Pretty damn popular.
Yeah.
There's young kids that would have no idea. If they started playing the MASH theme, no, there would be people who have no idea what that is. But everybody in England knows the Doctor Who theme. So I can't get state it more. That's iconic.
I know because I mean I'm a big Star Wars guy myself, and I know also with Star Trek that when new stuff comes out or
Yeah,
changes are made,
yeah.
the internet sort of loses its mind. Um,
You think?
are Doctor Who fans that um, should I say
Yes.
vocal? Okay.
Yeah, the answer is yes. Whatever. You don't even have to finish that statement. Yeah. Um, there's I hate to say this, and I don't think people would argue with me. There is a dark underbelly of Doctor Who fandom, and unfortunately, I now have seen glimpses of it.
Mhm.
You know, we're in a weird time, where fans feel that they own these properties, and it's become more than just a pastime or entertainment. Um, when Shooty was first starting, there was some very rough stuff that was, being said online, and it's not necessarily just saying, oh, it's woke now, which is so silly because Doctor Who has almost always been woke, even back into the 60s. It always had things like that going on, and what would have been woke at that time. But there was some nasty stuff about Shooty being a black man, that was really, I'm like, it's been a woman before. I mean, I couldn't believe that it took up to literally 2024 for a black man to play the Doctor. I would have figured that would have happened ages ago, but it's taken this long.
Yeah.
um yeah, it's unfortunate. Doctor Who fandom is in that respect no different from just about any other fandom. I have yet to find a fandom that's devoid of at least a segment of nastiness in it, and you tend to find them. Weirdly enough, the Dark Shadows community is pretty good. There's a little bit of weirdness in it every once in a while. There's a little bit of that, the people who are the gatekeepers,
Right.
you know, and only a tiny little bit of nastiness or whatever. It's been actually one of the better ones that I've rubbed elbows with,
That's awesome.
over the years. Yeah,
So,
the Planet of the Apes one isn't so bad either.
right,
Yeah, but Doctor Who, no. I mean, that's almost now it's getting close to Star Wars levels of
vitriol.
toxicity,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what are some projects you're working on now? What are some stuff people can be looking out for?
So, I got a new nonfiction one coming out in August on comic books.
Mm,
So just recently, I put out a whole history and guide sort of to DC's The Brave and the Bold,
okay.
which ran from the 50s, and through the 80s. And now I'm putting out its sister uh, publication, which is a look at Marvel Team Up.
Oh, all right.
So it's literally going to be like a dossier on every single issue of Marvel Team Up, including giant size giant size superheroes #1, giant size Spider-Man 1 through 6, I think it is.
Mhm.
And I think there's another oddball thing in there because those are all to me very much, integrated with
Yeah.
Marvel Team Up. And all 150 issues, and then all of that is punctuated by essays about different eras or bigger movements in Marvel Team Up over the years. The Brave and the Bold book is completely written by me, but I actually brought in some friends
Mm,
uh, to write essays, but I handed out the assignments. So like there's one about how Marvel Team Up really used the Marvel monster characters a lot in the early days. How prevalent the Human Torch was in this series. Um, the amazing era of Chris Claremont and John Byrne and all of the issues that they did, which is some of just my most favorite comic books of all. That stuff those issues are just fantastic. Um, like the dominance of Sal Buscema in Marvel Team Up. I mean,
mm,
he's like one of the most prolific artists for that book, and just things like that. The Tom DeFalco and J.M. DeMatteis
mm.
era of the book, so it's fun stuff, kind of punctuating all of the fact files or dossiers. So that we're pushing right now. That should be out in August. I just started writing the next one of my DC Jones and Adventure Command books. That's going to be #4, and that's my ode to GI Joe Adventure Team
Nice.
because I can't write it. There's a license, and you can't get it or whatever. So it's my version of them, and they're like really pulpy good. It's a team of characters. They're running around in the mid 70s, so it has that fun background. And it's almost like they're men's adventure novels, not necessarily like The Destroyer, I guess, but there's that vibe that I think that guys or anybody really that likes men's adventure novels would get a kick out of the DC Jones books.
And we're back. So, Jim Beard is a really awesome dude. Thank you, Jim, for coming on to talk to us. We'll talk to you some more just about everything involving comics, pop culture, and all the cool things that we like. And like I said, please go to Amazon, type in Jim Beard. There's a whole list of books. I mean, I can go on and on about it, but he's done a lot. You can follow him on Facebook as well. He's always talking about the different projects he's working on. So Jim's a really cool dude. And you guys are cool dudes and dudettes for listening to us today. Have a wonderful weekend. And we'll see you next week with a whole new slate of shows. Take it easy.